Are you tired of creating great content for your podcast only to have it go unnoticed on social media? In this episode, we are learning how to create engaging content and how to use social media to promote your show with my friend Derek Videll. Welcome back to As It Relates to Podcasting. On this series, we are diving into all things social media with my friend Derek. This is episode 2 of our series, and I know that you're going to gain so much from this conversation. I am Simona, your host, podcast producer, and also agency owner of a podcast production company. I also host 2 of my own podcasts, in case you didn't know. You can check the show notes for more information on that. In any case, today's episode is with Derek Videll. He is the host of the Social Media Entrepreneurs Podcast and founder of socialbamboo.com. And he's an experienced social media expert who teaches creators and entrepreneurs how to effectively utilize social media in their businesses. In this episode, we talk about the best type of content to create for social media, thoughts on buying verification status, creating videos with multiple hooks, tips for repurposing your podcast into social media content, what to do if there is no hook in your content, and also tips for solo podcasters to find their hook in their content. We learn how to drive engagement on social media and how to create a posting schedule that actually works for you. So let's get into this conversation with my friend Derek so you can elevate your content and take your social media game to the next level. Derek, welcome back. Episode 2 of our 4-part series. I'm really stoked that you're here for this conversation.
Simona, I haven't seen you in a week. It's so good to see you.
The pleasure is all mine, and I'm really excited because today we are talking about creating engaging content. We started talking about content in episode 1, and I'm really glad that our listeners got to hear some of what you were sharing there because we're going to dive even deeper in this episode. We're also going to be talking about how to use social media to promote your show and your content to promote your show. So I think the best place to start, and you tell me what you think, but I feel like we should start by talking about what are the best types of content to create for social media.
Yes, we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the easiest ones for anyone to do that still do well. Because I think it's easy to say, just have like a really engaging hook and then like amazing value and then end it really good and make it high quality. Like that's easier said than done. But like, what are the ways to get posts out quickly? So the first way, let's talk about like screenshotting Twitter quotes, because it's so quick, right? If you're in the education space, most podcasters, you can do this. If you got like a thought that you just want to get out, it's one of the quickest posts to do. But there's a specific way to do it. So the last one I did, I actually went against this rule and it proved my point. So I'm just going to use it that way. But if you post on Reels and there is a black bar on top or bottom of the video, this doesn't kill the post nearly as much on any other platform, but this is an instant killer on there. So if you just screenshot, like if you just take the square image and then put that in Reels, it will auto add like a black background around this Twitter quote and it will get picked up in the wrong way. If you like save a 9:16 black photo where like even if it's all black, right, or all white, depending on if you do like Twitter white, light mode or dark mode, then it won't pick it up that it had to like add those bars around the post.
Oh wow.
So on the tactical side, that's the one thing you don't want to like save like if you screenshot your Twitter quote and then you turn it, like you crop it so it's like a little square and then you add that into Reels. I hope this makes sense. If people don't get it,
sense.
Okay, all right, perfect. If it like goes in as a square image, it's going to add the black space around it. That's when it kills it. If it's a 9:16 image, it's not going to affect it nearly as much. Although it is cool for people that are a lot more about aesthetics too. My account, they kind of know like, I'm not that good at it. It's going to be black and white design. It's going to be simple. It looks good enough, but like it's not weird for me to just post an all black post with just some white text on it. But if you want to do some kind of design around it, or I've even seen people put motion backgrounds behind it, which will do the best. If there is some kind of motion where maybe you're doing like an inspirational quote and then behind it is like a bunch of travel videos and then like on top of it lives that Twitter quote, then that will do well too. And in order to make that a process that you can still like have a thought, turn into a Twitter quote and post it within an hour, then you can maybe just get like 2 or 3 different video backgrounds that you just consistently use. But that'd just be one way to add on to it. And then you can even just throw a trending audio on it. One other thing I'll add is now that you can buy a verification status on Twitter for $11 a month. I just did that, but it does lend credibility.
Does it? Does it actually work? Because here's me being judgy. I was like, oh my God, buying a verification thing. But okay, I'm not throwing you any shade if you've done it, but I'm just curious.
I did it. And go ahead and throw shade. I don't care. Because it just looks legit, but it doesn't like give you a different color if you paid for it versus if you earned it. And it just, no one knows, right? It's on Twitter. But I don't really care about growing my Twitter audience. I'm just posting it on there so that I can screenshot it and move it over to the 9x16 platforms. They just see the blue check mark. It just makes you a little bit more credible to cold traffic, whether it's be subconscious or not to them.
No, I totally agree with that.
That's one other way that you can enhance that.
Interesting. Okay. But you know what's interesting though about what you said about, and not to cut you off, but what you said about the quote on top of like your videos or whatever. So I had posted very randomly on a dead TikTok account, might I add. Like I hadn't posted it to that TikTok account probably for like a year or something like that. I put a video. It was a video of me hiking in Sedona when I was there last year. And over top of it, I put like, I think it was like 5 tips for happiness in 2023 or something like that. And I put literally just block text on this thing. It got like 24,000 views on a dead account that I've never posted. I have not posted on an entire year. I was like, this is crazy to me. Like it was crazy. So it works.
Yeah. it had high watch time. It kind of has like 2 hook points because they can, if they're coming from a video right before, if they just watch like 10 hiking videos because they're real outdoorsy, and now they get there and like it's me with the black background, like they're probably like, I'm not into this right now, right? So it makes it so it doesn't get instantly skipped by some people. And I think that's one of the qualifications for viral content is if I just made the best Twitter quote ever, like if I was the one who came up with "be the change you wish to see in the world," this amazing quote, and I posted it that way, there's still going to be so many people who are not ready for black background content with white text that just like are like, no thank you, like that just instantly skip
I don't like that quote.
And it's so much the algorithm I feel like is based around average view, percentage watch, like average percentage watch time, and that percentage, like those people who watch less than 1% are ultimately the ones like really throwing that average off, right? So if your post does end up to someone who is not your ideal audience, do they instantly skip it is one of the qualifications for it to really be able to breach to that wider range, which is why if I did a sales tip where it was really psychological based and only salesmen are even going to understand what I'm saying. Instagram is such a scattershot platform. Like they all kind of are in a way. But Instagram really is like, it's going to wind up in front of people who aren't salesmen. But if I explain it, like, here's this trick that I learned from this car salesman one time, and even the average person finds it entertaining, it's going to break through. So there's a long answer to what you said there, but yeah, like for years, like they can just watch the hiking. If you just want to watch the hiking, you're covered.
Exactly. And then if you actually like want the tips, then that's cool too. Like, here you go.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So when you're creating content for social media, because obviously you have a podcast, this is how we first connected. And, well, we connected on Instagram, but then I was on your podcast. Now you're on my podcast. I love this so much. When you're creating content for your podcast, and which, by the way, let me just plug in your podcast. Make sure you go listen to it. It's in the show notes. The link is in the show notes. But if you're creating different types of content for social media, like what would you recommend? You take one podcast episode. What kind of content should creators be creating?
Yeah. So you always want to consider what format is going to give it the best chance. And then can I put it in that format? I think the other like North Star question that I'm using to figure out that format too is how can I get the most of amount of value in the least amount of time, and also like in the clearest way possible. I did this post the other day that was like some tips to like discover your niche, and it talked about how you can like niche down your audience, or you can niche down your offer. And for me, when I think like, all right, should I make this a reel? I can't say this all in 60 seconds. I'm like, I don't know how to be clear about it and get out multiple examples and say this. So although Reels is the thing, like this is the value that I want to get out, and it needs to be in a 10-slide carousel where each slide has like a different example. Yeah, and different examples, and it just needs to be consumed like that. So I think the format of last year, it was more important where it's like, just turn it into a reel no matter what you got to do. They're easing up a little bit. I think it seems like we still see carousel posts and single image posts all the time on Instagram, and it still owns the entire explore page. The explore page, it used to be like 1 or 2 reels. Now you'll see like for every 100 posts, maybe like 8 reels. But I mean, still, that's like most of them are image posts on there. So you absolutely can do well with those. So, consider like what's the clearest way and the most concise way to get this out where like I actually provide the most value. Otherwise, using a trending audio and stuff like that. If you want to cater to the authenticity first, and then see if you can use some of these tactical components after.
I love that. I'm so glad that you said that. And I think it's super important too, because exactly like you're saying, sometimes you do need all of that space that you would have in a carousel. Sometimes you want to write a longer caption and have it go with a quote that means something to you. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of the stuff that I've heard about Instagram in particular is how much people miss being able to just post a photo and having a meaningful caption that goes with that photo. Like, not everything needs to be video. And also not everyone likes to consume video content. You know what I mean? Like, some people love it, but some people really don't like it, which is why even you have differences in podcasts. Like, you have your video based podcast and you have audio podcasts, right? Like, obviously we're recording this with video, and I'm going to take the video and I'm going to use it in, social media content and all that. But there's people who don't actually watch YouTube. I don't watch YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to listen to a podcast, I'm listening to it. I don't have the time to sit down and watch it. Right. And so exactly like you're saying, like, making sure you're taking that content and catering it to your audience, and, making sure it's concise enough. And also you're delivering all of your value. I love that. I think that's so important and so valuable for our listener right now.
Good. Yeah. One other thing I'll add to is like it adds the extra preparation component where if you do want to check out, like before a podcast interview, if like these clips are going to be based around the questions I asked, right? If I'm about to interview a LinkedIn person, go on to YouTube, type in LinkedIn and similar terms, and like see the auto completes, or if you have like a program like Keywords Everywhere and you can actually check the search traffic, try to set yourself up to be able to create the videos that are actually have the search traffic and base some of your questions around that.
Yeah, I love that so much. So then when it comes to actually creating the video, we did talk about this a little bit in the first episode, but in case, our listener right now didn't have the chance to tune into that episode, when it comes to creating your content, obviously you want to start with a hook, right? But what if you're sitting here and you're like, I don't know where the hook is in my podcast episode? Like, what is something that define hook for us is what I'm trying to get.
A reason to keep watching the video.
I almost was like, what are we watching? I love that.
Yeah. So like, that's why like the format, a lot of times like 5 tips to do this are good, because then people know like, oh, I'm on number 3. I wonder what number 5 is. Right. Or people say like, wait till number 5. And they'll do stuff like that. Or like the simplest hook of all times, wait for it, ... So it doesn't always have to be like this, like really crazy, well thought out thing. It's just like a reason to keep watching, as long as that's covered you're good. Like even in the example before of you hiking, they just wanted to see like where the camera was about to go to. Like that's the hook there. So if your podcast doesn't really have that hook, it does all start with you like on the preparation side. So to know that, okay, next time, let me try to ask my questions in a way that are maybe a little bit more concise, or even plan them out beforehand so I can make sure it matches up with search traffic, and it is a really cool way to ask it. And then apart from that, if you're like, I really love his value, but man, I did not ask the question great. You mentioned it before we started recording where you said some people are like recording like a hook real quick. Like here is a clip from me in this podcast where I asked this guy this. It's insane. You could do that, or you could just have the hook exist in text, and that's totally fine.
I love that. These are such great tips. I love it so much. And if you're a solo podcaster, let's say you're not doing a guest interview and you don't have that interview content, most of your stuff is solo. Because sometimes what happens is when you're doing a solo episode, the content is valuable and it's really good, but there really isn't like a hook in there without starting out with so or now or that. And that's not really going to hook your listener. And you scroll by and you hear so, you're like, so what? You know what I mean? Like, see you later. So what would be a good tip for a solo podcaster? Would you say, if you're scripting out your episode, maybe write it with the hook in mind? I don't know.
It's been difficult because when I give my video editor a full length interview and then he gives me 9x16 clips, the fact that you're asking a question makes the hook like a lot more obvious what it should be. It's a lot cleaner, and I'll give them me doing like a 30-minute episode that I had some bullet points and everything, but I'm going off on tangents. I might think of an example on the spot, things like that. And it can be a lot more difficult to clip. My reels that have done a lot better that are just solo, I made intentionally as 9x16 content. So I love the idea of multi-purposing content. I do believe there is a level where if I really want to teach a sales tip in 60 seconds in the absolute best possible way, it might have come out naturally from me, like on my podcast, where it might be like a clip actually where like the starting point and the ending point are like really like 7 minutes apart on the podcast. And then it's like a minute clip. So that's part of it too. Know that you're certainly not trying to be like, which 60 seconds do I grab? You were trying to like cut the hell out of it, right? Like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, like you're just like trying to like grab and piece your point to be like said in the most concise and best way. So, if I'm sitting there thinking of an example and everything, like, you're trying to cut out all of that stuff and it just gets right to the point. But I do like doing these little sessions where I'll sit down and I'll have like throughout the week, if I ever have an idea for any kind of content, I'll just like put it in the respective notes folder for like if it's a podcast or a potential reel or whatever. And I actually do like to batch these, I've realized, and I just sit down and then I'll just like explain like 6 different topics directly to the camera, full eye contact, a lot more conscious of my body language than I would be in a 30-minute podcast episode where I might like lean back and things.
You're like
right?
I'm doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're gonna be like off camera for like half of my clips.
Right. I'm like, bye.
So it's just more intentionally made. Like this is a 9x16 video post for everywhere. And it's really simple to create these because you just say it as best as you can. And then if you don't like it at all, you just pause and then you just like say it again and you just say it again. And then you just move on to the next part. So you don't have to really script these out too much as long as you are okay. Just, pause, deliver it again. And then the video editing is usually pretty simple. But I haven't found that like those do a little bit better than if you just clipped out my longer form tangent. If I just make it concise, usually I'm only filming for about 3 minutes total time to turn it into that less than a minute reel.
That's really good. I love that. And do you think that there's ever a case where some content just can't, like some episodes just can't be turned into good clips?
We'll take for an example, an episode where I did like 13 like Canva design hacks, and I'm just like going through all of these. It was really difficult because I was like screen recording and I was like doing them, and it was difficult to like really fit it on there. If I did like Canva hack number 1, like I go to the camera, I'm like Canva hacks, like part part 3. And then I were to do screen recording and it's a quick time lapse and shows that, and a voiceover, like, to go back to the point before, like, are you providing as much value as possible in the shortest amount of time in the clearest way possible is like the question you're trying to answer. So the way that I delivered it on that show, where I was like, all right, what do we got here, guys? All right, so let's do this template.
Yeah.
You can heavily cut it and maybe get it, but there's just times where, yeah, I think you'll know if it doesn't hit. Like, I'm trying to like make this a thing. Like, when you watch your post, did it like hit, like where it just like felt like, boom, that was value. Like it just like really resonated, especially like at that last ending point where you're like, oh, that answered that question perfectly. So
like this answer to my question.
Yeah,
I love that. Like, yeah, clip done. Okay. So with that in mind, I want to talk really quickly about some best practices and tips that our listeners can use to drive engagement. We all know, the infamous link in bio term, in your caption, like, link in bio, whatever, or, putting a link in your stories, or, even optimizing your bio. Is there a way to optimize your bio to drive more listeners to your podcast from social media? I'm curious what you would recommend for best practices to get more listeners from social media to your show.
If you're going to actually get them from social media to podcast, the clip does like entice them. It is very hard for people to be like, that was an amazing clip, I bet the rest of it's amazing, because they're not clear on exactly what else they're going to learn, or what else would be covered. So at the end of one of your podcast clips, I have tried doing like a caption where it says like, see the rest in podcast episode 286 of the Social Media Entrepreneurs Show. It's not a bad idea at all. You always want to have your podcast as accessible as possible through your bio link too. But it's good to also, like, if you have at the very end, the call to action is read the caption. That translates to so much higher percentage of people doing it. So if you want to expand on their point, or like say anything else, this is a good way to like draw their attention. Say like, read the caption for more, or like why they would want to. And then you can expand on their point, but then also you could put like what else is covered in the podcast episode, and give them some other bullet points. And for your bio link, make sure that the ending of your bio doesn't say like, listen to my podcast here, or check out my site. Like, just anything like just so ambiguous like that, you can't really get people to do things. So if your podcast episode is about like how to grow on Instagram, or like my last episode is called like how to get 10K Instagram followers in 2023. If I put listen to how to get 10K Instagram followers in 2023, that will get so many more people to click than listen to the latest episode.
Yeah, because people are like, what's the latest episode? Like, okay, why do I care? Oh, I love that. That's a really good point. And so like, I mean, I guess the thing too is we forget, like with our bio, especially on Instagram or wherever it is, even on TikTok, honestly, you can change that. You know what I mean? Like, you can literally change that every time you have a new episode. Like, you can change it. It doesn't have to always be the exact same thing, because I think people get like desensitized to having the same type of content, the same expectation of like, here's the link, or here's, you know what I mean? It's good to have repetition, but I think also too, changing it up in subtle ways that make people think. And so what I'm kind of hearing here is that it really just depends on the type of content that you're creating, and that there's like an opportunity to create so much different content. Like, you have your quotes, you have your videos, you have your carousels, but you can also have story quotes with hyperlinks that link out, and then making sure you're putting an engaging caption in that hyperlink. Like, all of these little things are so important to get people from your social media page to actually taking action with you.
And in order to like keep up with all this, because it's like, dang, that's a lot of different things that you ultimately, once you figure out like all the different types of content you like to do, then you want to get it into like a repeatable weekly schedule that also makes the most sense, like in the order of things that you do. So for instance, like I have the podcast with the corresponding YouTube video. In an ideal world, I'm not perfect at this, they go out Monday mornings, promptly, at the exact same time. Well, actually, like the podcast is at 5 a.m. because a lot of people listen at work, but at YouTube, it's better to have it go out a little bit later.
Yeah.
So unless in the podcast I say, go check out the YouTube video, instead, like sometimes I'll say, make sure you switch to that if you are available to, and then they have to go to the same time. But then, it's best to give a YouTube video external traffic, like right at the beginning. So then in my schedule, like right after that is like send the email about that episode and drive the traffic to it. Right. So,
I love that.
Just ultimately like get your system down, and then it's just a matter of following your schedule.
Exactly. And or tweaking it, whatever you need to need to tweak. Do you think that people pay attention to new episode on X amount, like X day? You know what I mean? I think people learn that your podcast will go live on a specific day, but I mean, podcast and YouTube listenership, it's different, right? It's not like some people are sitting there waiting for the new episode, but a lot of the times people are like, okay, cool. Like now that this is live, let me take this with me in my car. Like I'll listen to it on the drive home. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily, but I like what you're saying though, creating your content schedule, making sure that you're actually sticking with it and like following it. That is my like biggest downfall right now. Because I used to use scheduling apps for like scheduling my content. And then I don't know how this happened. Well, I mean, I know how this happened because I literally did it, but my Facebook page got hacked from like an external, like I clicked an email. I really shouldn't have. I genuinely don't understand how I fell for it, but I did. And, they like closed down my Facebook page. And then what happened was that page though still is linked to my Instagram. So I can't create a new page and I can't link it to my Instagram. So I can't schedule any content because there's no Facebook page to link it to. And like with Meta, you have to schedule, like you have to link them now. So I'm relying on like posting manually. And I just honestly, I forget. So now my posting schedule is all out of whack because I'm not actually posting any other content. But
you like to batch tasks?
Yeah.
Typically, like whether it be like recording a bunch of videos or scheduling a bunch of posts.
Yeah.
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 Recording 4
and
podcasts.
So, right. Say that again.
Recording 4 podcast episodes.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I mean, I just think it's easier. You know what I mean? It makes like the post-production of stuff so much easier. And then also too, though, like I put calendar reminders and, the calendar reminder go off and I'm like in the middle of doing something else. I'm like, okay, like, I'll do it later. And then by the time later comes, it's like Saturday and the episode's gone out on Thursday. I'm like, whoopsies. Like, I had a new episode that went out last week. I haven't even posted about it yet, so I think that it's like, making sure you're creating your content, making sure that you're actually, being mindful of like the schedule that you have, but also taking the action to actually post the episode. If you don't post about it, how are people supposed to know? Right.
It's so much. And like I had to preface my answer right at the beginning where I was like, in an ideal world, like they're both getting posted at this time. And then my email goes out right after. Like I really think like the entrepreneurs that are, the Alex Hormozis and everything. Yeah, they do all of it. It really is discipline is one of the biggest differences between like an 8-figure or 6-figure entrepreneur.
It's funny though. We do that for all of my clients, like that we, help in the production business. They're all on track, like on target all the time. Their emails go out the day, the time, the blog post, like everything goes out perfectly. And then it's like, oopsies, I got to get my own stuff on track.
Yeah.
Too. It's funny how that happens, huh?
Yeah, it totally does.
Oh man. Okay, Derek, this was such a good conversation about creating content. I know it was super valuable for our listeners. Is there anything that we may have missed before we wrap up this conversation? We are going to be talking about maximizing your reach afterwards. So
maximizing reach. Okay. We'll save it for that then.
Cool.
Definitely subscribe. And I will see you next week, Simona.
See you next week. Thank you for joining.
I'm going to wear the same thing though.
Me too.
All right.
Me too. I'm going to wear the same thing for the whole series. So just, to make
Keep
it easy.
Consistent. Perfect.
I'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for joining Derek and I for this conversation. I hope you gained a little nugget of knowledge, a little piece of wisdom that you can take with you and up your social media game. If you'd like to connect with Derek, you can find him on his website, which is socialbamboo.com, on Instagram at socialbamboo_, on Twitter at Derek Videll, and on TikTok, Social Bamboo. He also has a ton of free resources on his website, and he hosts a podcast called Social Media Marketing Podcast. So be sure to go and check out all of his links, connect with him further, and let us know what your biggest takeaway of this conversation was. We want to know, we want to hear from you. Send us a DM on Instagram, and honestly, it'll make our day. So thank you so much. And be sure to leave this podcast a rating and review where you are listening. I would be so, so, so grateful. I love reading your reviews. I read every single one. It like genuinely and sincerely makes my entire day. So with that in mind, thanks so much for joining us. I will see you on the next one.